join me in welcoming Vernadette Broyles.
Thank you. Can you please show the video? We need the audio.
Devastated. I felt angry. I felt betrayed. I mean, I would have never thought, you know, who would think that when I dropped my child off at school, I never would think that she would be sexually assaulted in a bathroom by another little boy.
How did this happen? How is it that a mom drops off her daughter at school, at kindergarten, expecting her to be safe, expecting her to be supervised, and somehow during the course of the day, her 5-year-old daughter is assaulted in the privacy of her girls' bathroom, and assaulted by a boy, for that matter, who apparently was allowed to be there? How does this happen? Can people read that? Superintendent duty issues a policy. That's what it basically says.
Be worried about them, and they're not going to be, exposed to something that you're not aware of as a parent. I learned about the transgender policy from my wife Gina. She was on Facebook, and she just happened to be on the Facebook page of the superintendent and got wind of this policy that they were enacting that was going to open bathrooms, locker rooms, sports teams, overnight lodging to both sexes.
For such a significant policy to be communicated via Facebook was, just not how, it's not how it should be done, and it's not how City Schools of Decatur typically operates. I began asking around to other parents to see if they had heard about this or if they were familiar with this. And not a single parent that I had spoken to was aware.
The Concerned Parents of Decatur legitimately wanted to work with the district, with the superintendent, with the school board to help them to understand what their concerns were and to find medium ground. They met with the superintendent, they wrote several letters to him, they emailed to him, and each time that they expressed their concerns, they got the same consistent response: we hear you, we understand, but in essence, we're doing nothing to change this policy. Then in the October school board meeting, the policy was placed on the agenda, and that was quite a meeting. At the October meeting, many people spoke, but one was particularly memorable, and he was the former chairman of the Board of Pardons and Paroles. Given his understanding of human nature, he specifically testified to his concern that this policy would be used by young boys to gain access to girls in private settings for mischievous purposes. And it was as if he was prophetic, because that is precisely what has happened.
My daughter stated to me that she was in class and she asked the teacher if she could go to the bathroom. And the teacher said yes. So she was in the bathroom and she was pulling up her pants when one of her classmates came in the bathroom, a little boy. She tried to leave out of the bathroom. The little boy pushed her against the bathroom stall, basically pinned her up against there. She asked him to stop. He wouldn't. He took his fingers and he was penetrating her through her pants. And she asked him to stop and stated several times that it hurt. He refused. Once he was done, she went to class. I asked her if she told anyone about it. She started crying, saying, "No, Mama, I didn't tell nobody, but I didn't ask him to come in the bathroom with me. I didn't know he was going to do that." And I told her that it was not her fault. It was just not her fault. He should not have been in that bathroom.
Thank you. This is Pasha Thomas and her daughter, who is my client. It's a case that we have out of Decatur, Georgia. And like none other that I have come across in my travels and endeavors in this arena have I seen the collateral damage that is the fallout from these policies, the unintended, or perhaps, I won't say intended, but certainly unintended consequences of these policies. How did this happen? Can we go, oh, I advanced this, excuse me. All right. Its inception was from a policy out of the United States Department of Education under President Obama's administration. A Dear Colleague guidance letter that was issued to the schools across the country that required them to interpret Title IX to prohibit discrimination on the basis of gender identity as opposed to sex, a wholesale rewriting of the statute. This had the effect of causing, this exploded across the country. There are these policies, there were forces already in place that were just waiting for this opportunity, activists already waiting. So as soon as this came forth, it was their excuse to then be able to say, oh, well, we're now jeopardizing federal funding. We need to now open up all of our facilities and begin to treat gender identity as sex. Now, it was rescinded by President Trump in the February 2017, and it was enjoined before that. But by that point, the damage had been done across the country. Litigation all over the country, and policies like this all over the country, including even a conservative state like Georgia. So, sorry, you don't see what I see. All right, the common pattern that we see with these things is that they are policies that are passed in the dark, typically outside of the purview of the sunshine laws, out of the open hearings of the school boards, which require notice to parents and so forth. So they'll be done quietly, so the parents don't know about it, do not give their input or raise their objections. So public schools became ground zero in a cultural war of our time. It began coming into schools masquerading as something innocuous, anti-bullying, tolerance type of policies, creating safe spaces. However, it quickly began to show what its true nature was, which is begin to indoctrinate administrators in a whole new paradigm of the human race, basically. And then from them, the teachers, and then inevitably from them, the students. It began to teach us a whole new language. And as we know, how we speak is how we think. You control the language, you control the thoughts, you control the belief system. Pronoun codes, et cetera, et cetera. Bathroom policies, we need to understand this. They are not about giving children, certain vulnerable children, the ability to take care of their bodily needs. That is the surface propaganda. What they truly are about are tools of indoctrination. Why? Because they compel kids to normalize a radical new belief system by their actions. They have to go to the restroom. So they will now internalize a choice of where to go based upon, or an expectation of who's going to be there, based upon a completely new radical belief system. This is brilliant. It's insidious. In the process, it's now conscripting our kids into a social experiment without our consent, and it's propagating or facilitating social contagion. We heard some statistics yesterday about the number of trans-identified people in the country was supposedly well under 1%. Well, amongst high school children, it is, the last stat I read, 1.8%, and in some schools, I've heard of 5% and more. We know that this is doing tremendous damage to our children. I will not go into this, but basically the conveyor belt to destruction is social transitioning. That is not innocuous because then it leads to puberty blockers that interferes with their essential development, physical and mental, psychological, brain development. Then onto cross-sex hormones. When you add cross-sex hormones in the wake of puberty blockers, you sterilize children. Children making the decision to not have children while they're children. It's unthinkable. And then on to surgeries where they're literally losing healthy body parts, mastectomies, castrations, hysterectomies, teenagers going through menopause. The goal? Let me be very, very, very clear what the goal is by the activists and by this agenda. It is to strip away the protective layer of parents from children in order to be able to access the gold, which is the child. So what are they doing? We have activist organizations in our schools today, and particularly that have overrun the education organizations, unions, the NEA in particular, completely conscripted into this agenda. And they are now, at this point, bold. Their literature actually says things like this, deliberately undermining parental rights, right in front of our eyes. Quote, you might not be able to, here we go. Here's one quote. Privacy and confidentiality are critically important for transgender students who do not have supportive families. Even inadvertent disclosure to parents could put a student in a potentially dangerous situation at home. So it is important to have a plan in place to help avoid any mistakes or slip-ups. Make sure we don't slip up and let the parents know what we're doing with your child at school. That's basically, at essence, what they're talking about. This is out of Schools in Transition, a guide for supporting transgender students, endorsed by the NEA. Another quote. School officials interact with the student on a daily basis and focus on supporting the student's growth and development. Oh, parents don't do that? Excuse me. Which gives school personnel unique insight into the student's needs without the biases parents can or are perceived to have. We're just biased, folks. We just don't know what we're doing. Public school counselors, I'm telling you right now, if you have a child in school, monitor closely, or frankly, forbid your child to go to the public school counselor. My child, my 15-year-old, I've told her, we've had many talks, you do not go to that person. They are not trustworthy. Here's a quote from the American School Counselor Association. School counselors recognize that the responsibility to determine a student's gender identity rests with the student, this minor, this child, rather than outside confirmation from medical practitioners, mental health professionals, or documentation of legal changes or parents. So why are they doing this? Why are they stripping away the protective layer of parents? Well, because we all instinctively know we've had children, because children are manipulable. They believe adults. They lack the life experience to be able to see through lies readily. They can be taken advantage of. So for that reason, we were just talking earlier today, for that reason, the society surrounds children generally with protection. You don't allow a child to intake tobacco. You don't allow a child to buy alcohol. You don't allow a child to drive before a certain age. Why? Because they can harm themselves for life, and we know this. I'll give you a quick example. For 12 years, I was a guardian ad litem in court representing children in custody disputes, or at times representing parents in custody disputes. I came across, I had a case in which a young lady named Sydney, at the age of 10, she wanted to divorce her mom, so to speak. As we delved into the case, we began to, it became clear her step-parent mother had been literally implanting false memories into this young child, such that she had vivid, authentic, she would passionately describe them with all sincerity, memories of being abused when she was 2, and when her mom was changing her diaper. That's physically not possible, okay? etc., and many other things. She swore she would run away and perhaps kill herself if she was required to go live with her mom. Today, she lives with her mom, extremely happy. The court saw through it, broke off that toxic relationship, and did what needed to be done. Did not listen to the child who was clearly being manipulated. Another quick example is the Coleman. I probably shouldn't say that. Well, that's right. It's long gone. A family where a psychiatrist he was an activist for sex abuse, and he imposed his activism on the family, convinced the mother this child had been sexually abused. She had not been, by her father, by the way. It destroyed the family. All right. Trans kids, so all children are vulnerable, but trans kids are especially vulnerable. Why? Because they have high levels of comorbidities, anxiety, autism, depression, anorexia, and sexual abuse. The gender-affirming interventions that they're being prescribed themselves cause emotional disturbance and impedes healthy brain development. There's one case study that suggests it actually lowers IQ. So, what's happening? We're stripping away legal protections in children. Not we. The activists want us to get away from the best interest of the child standard to child autonomy standard, or the child's assumes best interest standard, where the child themselves assumes what is best for themselves, and seeking to lower the age of consent. So now when parents and children disagree, this is what the activists and their literature says. Avenues for providing gender-affirming interventions over parental disagreement. Legal carve-outs for parental consent, similar to that of the reproductive health services we've all been talking about, and that's the direct analogy, and they will cite Casey. The mature minor doctrine, presuming that there are certain minors that are mature enough, which is a lie. And then lastly, calling for state intervention alleging neglect. All right, I'm going to close in just a second. I want to read this. This quote is the best explanation of what the consequence and the implications for our culture is of this agenda. This is not about a few kids or even a few adults. This is an existential threat to our culture. You can't read it, I'm going to read it. Most assume the transgender movement is just a simple matter of protecting from discrimination a tiny demographic. But when you consider the enormous degree of state-sponsored censorship that is required by the movement, and the punishment meted out to people of conscience by every one of the laws its activists seek to pass, a far different story reveals itself. Its extreme individualism demands the breakdown of society's mediating institutions such as family, faith, and private association that serve as buffers that protect the individual from state meddling. It sows chaos into the language, requiring us all, universally and without exception, to accept seismic change in the very definition of what it means to be human. It requires a very aggressive program of censorship and propaganda in order to sustain itself and prop up its illusions over any common understanding of reality, and to condition people to get with the program. It thereby sows the conditions for totalitarianism. We have no choice but to speak out. So my last, minute or two, I want to talk about how we can speak out. First of all, there are bills that are being introduced in states across the country, about 6 right now. South Dakota, South Carolina, Ohio, Georgia, Alabama soon, and Texas next year. I think there's one more, called Vulnerable Child Protection Act. They essentially would ban puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and these horrid Nuremberg-like experiments, surgeries on our children. We need to speak out and get a hold of our legislatures and not let go until they support this, bottom line. Other ways to speak out. Be present in your schools. We already talked about that, but your presence is critical. Sponsor redemptive organizations. There's a case, a federal case that's fascinating, where there was I think it was a Bible club or something along those lines, and the students themselves spoke, because they have constitutional rights. The students spoke on these types of issues and countermanded the message that the school was giving, and the court forced the school to listen to the students. And it's fascinating, the power that they have. Educate your community. Get Be present, be heard in the school board meetings. We have a situation in Pickens County, Georgia, where we had done education in the community 2 months prior to that, when the superintendent tried to pull this kind of nonsense in a town of 3,600 people, Jasper, Georgia. 900 people showed up to the school board meeting. It is the only time that I am aware of that we got one of these policies to be overturned because the community would not have it. I would say this is my last thought. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. Litigation? Yes, open records request. Someone mentioned that. I'm not going to take the last couple seconds. Write op-eds. Get out there. Be published. This will disinhibit the vast majority of people who agree with us. I'm telling you what, even many liberals do. Realize this is child abuse. And then litigation as a last resort. You can come see me if there's truly a need for that. So here's my last thought. Our children, the Supreme Court rejected in 1925, almost 100 years ago, the notion that our children are the mere creations or creatures of the state. A quote from Alex Kendrick I just saw day before yesterday, who just spoke, and he said, "Whoever wants these children the most will have them." I'm telling you, they want our kids badly, badly. We need to want them more so. So we need to overcome. Here's my last thought. We as adults who believe in something larger than ourselves, we need to overcome our identity crisis in order to help them overcome theirs. Why? Because who do we have living in us? We have the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead. And if he who raised Christ from the dead is in us, he gives life to our mortal body, but he also gives us courage and strength. And you know what? He put everything underneath our Savior's feet. Why? For us, so that we can turn around and enforce that on the earth. We have got to overcome our identity crisis and who we are so that we can step out, put ourselves on the line, and help our children overcome the identity crisis the other side wants them to have. Thank you so very much.